I've made videos in the past that covered the Marvel Legends 12-inch scale line. It started of course under ToyBiz, then when Hasbro took over they launched their Icons series, which was replicating the same idea, which was relatively short-lived, and then it was rested for a good few years, until around about 2016 when Hasbro experimented with the 12-inch line once more. This line would be much shorter lived than the previous line and would only run to about 9 characters with a couple of variants for Spider-Man and Deadpool. Now all in all I have to say I think this is a shame, because whilst the Icons line, their initial attempt at a 12-inch line, definitely left something to be desired, and for example you can check out my Colossus or Doctor Doom video, nice sculpts but overall the articulation didn't work particularly well in some cases and there was just something a little bit lacking with them overall. This new revised line definitely felt a lot more deluxe and it felt like a lot more care and attention went into it, plus they also came with a number of accessories in some cases as well. For me personally, the standout of this line is the Wolverine figure. I've already made a separate video about that figure, but suffice it to say I think it's the most successful figure out of any of the 12-inch Marvel Legends. But today I'm going to take a look at the most ambitious, because I am going to be looking at the 2016 version of the Incredible Hulk. Now I should clarify and say that they actually did already release a Hulk in the Icons line way back when ToyBiz was running the show. Now I remember this being announced and I was quite excited for it when I saw the first images, because of course he is an oversized figure and he is in that Marvel Legends scale. So this looked initially like a really exciting release, until started to see some of the in-hand photos where it started to look a little less impressive and the sculpt looked to be a little bit unusual. I've never been a huge fan of this head sculpt, and whilst the articulation scheme looks pretty comprehensive, the overall aesthetic looks very clumsy and clunky, and yeah, some of those joints just look very unseemly. So when Hasbro announced that they were going to be doing a new Hulk for their 2016 line, I was really excited to get my hands on him. Starting off with the packaging, you'll notice that this is obviously a huge oversized box. This is much bigger than any of the other figures in the line, so they've kept that scale there, which is really impressive stuff. And it is a very heavy box, which is fantastic, a very good sign that we're getting some real quality here. Now in terms of the overall design, it is largely just a big window display. Behind the figure we can see a nice purple card there that makes it nice and colourful, nice and attractive to the eye. And on the front, there's a little bit of a holographic image running around the front with the Marvel Legends logo up front and centre. Other than that, there's not an awful lot going on the front of the packaging, but the side panel is very nicely done. This is essentially just one photo, a production photo of the figure, which looks really good, and of course it has that holographic foil running underneath it, so it catches the light nicely and has all different colours, which looks really nice, very attractive. You can put this on the shelf with the others in the line, and although it'll tower above them, it will display quite nicely with the others. But I have to say it's the reverse of the packaging that is the star of the show, because I think they've done a very nice job of this. We have a really nice big image photo of the figure itself looking in action pose there, which looks really cool. Again, it has that holographic foil running underneath it, so of course when you move the box it catches the light and it creates that multicolour effect, which is fantastic. And then underneath we have another 4 images highlighting the key features of this sculpt. And I think this is really presentable, very displayable, and is a nice piece of work in its own right. So then, moving on to the figure himself. Well, the first thing to say is he is oversized. He is significantly taller than the other figures in the line, which is fantastic. Love to see that scale in action here, which is great. So, whereas the others are about 12 inches, he's got to be coming in at about 15 inches. He's still shorter than a quarter scale, which is an 18-inch figure, but he's still significantly taller than the average 12-inch figure. And as I said, he's quite heavy too. Now this Hulk figure comes with 2 different and very distinct head sculpts. And I have to say, I have mixed feelings about both of them for different reasons. I think my preference is definitely this roaring head. This looks more like a classic Hulk, as if it was drawn by, say, Sal Buscema, perhaps. It definitely has a more classic feel to his features overall, and I really like that he's got this roaring expression. This definitely captures the essence of the Hulk. I love the paint apps when it comes to the teeth and the gums and the tongue. I think they've done a really nice job of that. And we can see a little bit of a green wash running through the black hair, and a little bit of a brown wash running through the skin. Now this is fantastic stuff, because as I often say, you can have the best sculpt in the world, but if you don't capitalise on it with your paint washes, then you're kind of losing the overall effect and the impact this could have. So it's nice to see Hasbro capitalise on the sculpt here with those extra paint washes, because it really helps the figure pop a lot more and it really shows off the detail, which I think is great. Likewise, this care and attention to detail runs through the entire sculpt, which is fantastic. We can see there's lots of veins popping out here, lots of muscle definition. This is all really, really good stuff, very impressive. And as I say, the key thing is that they've absolutely capitalized on it by giving it a little bit of an extra wash. These browns really accentuate all the different muscle groups and those veins popping out the skin, and it looks really, really good. And it feels like they've put a lot of care and attention into this sculpt, and like I said, I think it works very, very well. Likewise, the sculpt on the arms is very nicely done. We can see the two giant pins, which may upset certain collectors, but for me, to be honest, I really don't notice it. I actually think it works really, really well. The focus is definitely on this fantastic sculpt and the paint taps, so for me, I actually almost don't even see the pins, so I think it looks really good in hand. And speaking of the hands are a nice big mould as well. We do get two swappable hands, so we get two fists and we get two open hands, and the open hands are really nicely done, and I think they've done a very, very nice job of this overall. And then we can see that continues all the way down into the legs as well. I really like the ripped jeans effect. I particularly like the white paint wash that's gone over this to make it look like the jeans are really torn properly. The top of the jeans, there's not a lot of extra colours going on. There's just a flat plastic that it's moulded in, but here where we can see the rips, it looks really good, really authentic, and it really helps sell this figure. I think it looks really, really good. So, crucially, how does he fare when it comes to articulation? Well, he's got a ball joint in the head, so he can spin his head right the way around, and he's even got the ability to look up and down a little bit too. Now, this works fairly well when he's looking straight on. It doesn't really work when he's looking side to side, unfortunately. You can't really tilt it up and down from there. You can only tilt it forwards and backwards when he's looking straight at you. He has ball jointed shoulders, so of course they kick all the way out there, really good height on them, which is great, and of course they kick back as well. He's got a complementary bicep swivel, which is great stuff, and it works very nicely with the ball joint. It's not too noticeable. He's also got double jointed elbow, so his hands can get right back to touch his head more or less, which is great stuff, and kind of unusual for a big muscled figure like this, so I'm very impressed with that. And he's then got a pin swivel at the wrist, so his hand rotates 360 degrees, and of course it arcs inwards and outwards as well. I really like this. Again, it's quite seamless and it's very smooth, and I think they've done a very good job of this without compromising the sculpt. However, things go quite wrong when it comes to the chest articulation, because there is a ball joint in there, but as you can see, it won't hold its position, so you can move him from side to side, and you should be able to arc him up and down as well, but unfortunately, he will always snap back to front and centre. He will not hold his position, so this is really bad news if you want to put him in some interesting and dynamic poses. He does have a lower ab crunch though, and this works pretty well. It's not a huge range of motion that you get out of him, but it is complemented by the chest joint, so you can get him to look forwards and backwards a fair distance. It's just not as much as you would hope. In the hips, he's got a ball joint, so his legs kick out all the way to the side. They look pretty seamless, so I'm quite pleased with this. And he's also got an upper thigh swivel as well, which is pretty good stuff. And so the legs can also kick forwards and backwards, a pretty healthy distance. I'm really pleased with this. And he's also got double jointed knees as well, which is really, really good. And it's a nice, strong figure. When you bend those joints, it clicks into place and it feels very sturdy, which is great stuff. Now, it's also complemented with a swivel beneath the calf, and then he's got a hinge in the toes, a swivel at the ankle so it can pivot from side to side, and of course it also hinges as well, going forwards and backwards, which is fantastic stuff. So this is pretty comprehensive. I can't imagine what else you could get out of the legs. As I mentioned previously, he does come with a couple of extras. There's not too many because, of course, he is the Hulk. He doesn't really come with a lot of guns or accessories, generally speaking, but he does come with an alternate head and an extra open hand and an extra closed fist. The second head sculpt is a strong contrast to the first. Obviously, this is a much calmer, more relaxed Hulk, although he still looks pretty stern here. To my eyes, he definitely has more of a resemblance to the on-screen Hulk than the Hulk that I've grown up reading in the comic books. I'm not sure if that was the intention or whether it's just me, but I think that would be a really savvy, smart move on Hasbro's part, because I think between the two head sculpts, I think you're kind of pleasing everyone. You've got your kind of classic snarling Hulk, Savage Hulk, comic book version of the character, and then we've got the more cinematic looking Hulk, and I think that works perfectly well because you're pleasing both markets, and why not? So anyone who loves the films, you've got pretty much an Avengers accurate Hulk, and if you're a fan of the comic books, you're satisfied there too. So I think that's a really smart move, and for the most part I think both sculpts work pretty well. And I just wanted to highlight once again the power of great sculpting, because if we use different lighting techniques, if we put the light in a slightly different place, we can really see the power of this sculpt in the shadows that it creates, and it really shows off all of the bumps and grooves and veins and just little subtle things in the sculpt, which is fantastic. But also the way it creates shadow across the figure, particularly under the eyes, is really, really strong and very impactful, I think. And then finally, just to give you a sense of what the scale looks like, here he is next to the 12-inch Wolverine figure from the same line. Now, obviously, Wolverine was also to scale, so he's slightly shorter than your usual 12-inch scale, so he probably comes in about 10 inches, but you can still get a good sense here of what the difference looks like. You can definitely see that the Hulk is certainly oversized, a much bigger, much chunkier, much heavier figure. So then, final thoughts? Well, for me, he's going to be a 4-star figure. I love the sculpting on this figure. I think it's pretty phenomenal all in all. Really couldn't fault it. I love the paint apps. I think they've done a very nice job on it, and I think they've done everything they possibly could to make this figure look fantastic. I really like that we get 2 closed fists and 2 open hands, and we get an alternate head with 2 very distinctly different looks. I think that's really thoughtful, and I think it works really well for collectors. So all of that is top-notch stuff. So what stops it being a 5-star figure? Well, it's the articulation scheme. The design, brilliant, but it doesn't work. That's crucially one of the problems. And really, when I'm talking about the failure of the articulation, it is in the torso. That chest piece, it just doesn't work. At least, I don't know whether I've just been unfortunate in mine, but yeah, he does not hold his position. He constantly snaps back to front and center, and it kind of makes the whole point of that articulation completely redundant. So I'm not sure why they did that, to be honest. And likewise, the ab crunch, the lower ab crunch, I think it works well enough, but I think that it could have worked a bit better, and it should have done considering how big and chunky it is. So that really just lets the figure down, I think, for me. The fact that it can't turn from side to side properly really, really limits the amount of poses you can put this figure in, and I think it's a shame because it's such a fantastic figure otherwise. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.